But what sort of happened? Why did they fade away this time, as they seem to do so often?
The Irish bench was coming on just as Ireland were building.
Lock Dupont on the bus?
That's not very positive. They don't have enough frontline ball carriers.
Marcus Smith at fullback, and you're curious about that as an option, then you do it in this game.
Do you think they have enough to win in Rome?
France surely will not be slipping up at Twickenham.
Go.compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby Podcast. Every rugby player knows they need the support of their team to get the best results, and it's the same with insurance. When you are looking for great deals on your insurance, you can find the perfect support in Go.compare, helping compare the right deals for you. Feel the deal with Go.compare.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the latest episode of the Telegraph Rugby Podcast. We've had a very busy opening weekend of Six Nations action, and we're going to try our best to dig into all of that over the next few minutes. I'm Ben Coles. I'm joined by Charlie Morgan. Hi, Charlie.
Colesy, I'm going to give you my very best.
Oh, I would expect nothing less, but I feel reassured, I feel comforted that you're offering me that. And I'm also joined by Charles Richardson. What are you bringing to the table?
Probably not my best, to be honest.
Not your best?
No, probably not. We'll give it a go, though.
Great. Good. Let's start with what happened in Dublin. Charlie, you were there. Obviously, we're going to dissect this, but I just want to get your just initial kind of summary of what you saw.
Oh, I saw as we kind of forecast, a selection and a tactical plan that caused Ireland problems for 45 to 50 minutes outside of a kind of passage where, England obviously were under massive pressure themselves, but defended really well with that back row that they went for, and they didn't have a line-out platform really, which was another kind of predictable aspect of it. And then they fell away, and they just can't really fail to shake this idea that they're quite a flimsy team from a strategic point of view, maybe a psychological point of view as well, and they're just falling away in those second halves as they continue to do, albeit against the very best teams. And Ireland's class really told, not just as a side necessarily, and they kept faith in that tactical template and how they keep the ball and stress teams like that, but also just the depth of their 23 with Dan Sheehan, Jack Conan, Jack Crowley, phenomenal from the bench.
Oh, that's a lovely summary. Charles, if we dig into our favourite moments of the weekend, our highlights, can I start with you? You were in Paris on Friday night. What was your favourite thing?
I was in Paris. Well, I mean, it's always, what they've built there, I mean, it's worn out record time now going on about it, but the occasion, the atmosphere, the spectacle was phenomenal. The noise of the Marseillaise, I recorded it on my phone actually while it was being sung. But in terms of on the field,
video or audio,
just audio. So I did it like sort of voice note, and it does come across pretty well. Actually, quite atmospheric.
New ringtone potentially.
New ringtone.
Please.
God, granddad. Ringtones. Polyphonic.
That's true. Sorry, I've aged myself.
And well, yeah, I mean, on the field, obviously, it was a complete washout, really. But it was a predictable washout. I think that's the tragic thing, was what I wrote on Saturday about Wales, is that I think everyone really sort of saw that coming. They gave it a good stab for sort of 10, 15 minutes where France were clunky and rusty and a bit clumsy. Dupont was a bit all over the shop, frankly, first 10 or 15 minutes, and then flick the switch, click of the fingers, and off they went, and it was fairly routine without France having to get out of third, maybe fourth gear. Gregory Aldrit was amazing. At number 8, I think he's a fabulous player, and I'm just really surprised that they dropped him in the autumn for that one game, because he's made them look a bit foolish with that, I think.
So what is your favourite moment, sadly?
My favourite moment would be, I'm going to do it across an 80-minute thing. I mean, a moment doesn't have a set period of time, and I'm just going to say Gregory Aldrit's performance.
Well, that was a nice little sassy kind of response there. I like that. Charlie, what was your highlight?
As well.
Paul Byram, shout out, the anthem singer at the Aviva Stadium. I just thought there was a bit of swaz on his renditions of three anthems. They obviously have 2 at home, don't they, Ireland? And then he added Fields of Athenry to everybody's sort of surprise, but then everybody eventually joined in. But it was really stirring, the first 2 anthems at least.
Obviously, watching off TV, we wondered whether that was sort of scripted, or whether that was part of the plan, or if they were going.
I wonder whether he just went.
He went rogue. Yeah, we need to kick off.
He was just feeling it and vibing, but it was vibey. There were sort of a lot of kind of during the rendition, which just dialed it up for me. It was great.
I want that as a clip that we can just put out.
Like Johnny Bravo. Another nice useful reference there. For everybody.
Yeah, I was going to say, we are keeping it up to date.
Ringtones and Johnny Bravo.
Oh, man. If I had to pick a highlight, it would probably be just wee Darcy Graham and his lovely little feet for what was a really enjoyable game at Murrayfield, and Scotland just needed to settle down. And I think we're all big Darcy Graham fans, aren't we? But his break set up that Hugh Jones second try was just really very Shane Williams-y, which he kind of is a bit anyway. He's actually taller than Shane Williams, which I had to double check when I looked into the...
He'd be lighter as well.
I would imagine he would be, yeah. But yeah, just a bit of magic from Scotland's very magical winger. And maybe he'll be busy in a red shirt this summer, which tees me up perfectly for what we've got coming up later in the podcast, because we're going to be hearing from Brian Moore and Serene McGeechan, because we have a brand new, very snazzy Lions squad selector going live on the website, which I would encourage everybody to take a look at. Who's done most of the legwork for putting in names for this? I'm looking at you, Charlie, but is it actually you, Charles?
I think it might be me. I certainly did all the forwards.
It's not. Not me.
And then I left it at that.
So essentially, if anyone is missing,
if anyone wants to select someone in the forwards among England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales who is not on our selector tool, then you can email me.
So you did the forwards.
If it's a back, then you should probably email Charlie.
Email me, because you did the forwards, and I sort of did like quality control and just went through to see who was missing, and Charlie's done nothing.
I've done nothing.
So direct everything towards Charlie.
I've picked my squad using it, and it's a lot of fun, and it is very comprehensive. I can tell you, and
Great.
You get to see, there are little kind of tidbits like how much everybody weighs, how tall everybody is, how there is an age profile that you get at the end when you've got your 37 man kind of party, and you can see how that compares to all the other pundits that have made the same selection. It's a lot of fun.
And as we were joking before coming on air, you can, if you so wish, pick Carl Sinclair as captain.
You can, yeah. Well, you can pick anyone as captain, but yeah, on the version we were shown, Carl Sinclair was captain, which was a surprise. In terms of
probably for Kyle as well,
might have been for Kyle as well. In terms of people, Charles, I know you're doing like a weekly like scouting thing for the Lions, aren't you? In terms of not actually for the Lions, but for us on the Lions. Can you,
that we know of.
Well, unless you've got a secret side hustle. Can you sort of tell us who do you think really put their hand up over that opening weekend?
Oh, well, actually, one person that I didn't mention, Jack Morgan against France, for Wales was one of the few standouts for Wales. But Rory Darge was excellent, wasn't he? I mean, you will hear more about him, and I'm sure you will tell us more about it, Cozy, as you were there. But Rory Darge was excellent for Scotland. And Dan Sheehan and Jack Crowley, I think their stock went up very much off the bench front. I mean, Dan Sheehan, I think 12 months ago, everyone's saying nailed on Lions test hooker. And I think really that there was the only real sort of mystery surrounding that was because of his ACL injury in the summer, and would he come back the same? Would he come back as fit? Has he got enough time? I think all of those questions are answered in the affirmative on Saturday night in Dublin.
Yeah, that is not a normal performance for someone playing their second game off an ACL injury. Game. Astonishing. Okay, let's dig in a bit more into what happened over in Dublin. If I trot out the old cliche, Charlie, of a game of two halves, is that kind of? I feel like that's fairly accurate in this game, because England started well and they played pretty good. But what sort of happened? Why did they fade away this time, as they seem to do so often?
Well, do you know what, this trait? It reminded me a bit of the 2023 game in the same stadium, and maybe just because it was in the same stadium, but the sort of pattern of England holding on defiantly, and you always having a feeling that although their intensity and their energy in defence was forcing errors, Ireland would eventually come good. But actually, the sort of trait of sticking to a strategy, and a strategy that troubles teams, predates to the Eddie Jones era. Do you remember how they had that habit of fast starts where they'd score early, and then as soon as a side sort of figured out and maybe broadened their plan, or just stuck to their plan, and England sort of punched themselves out, then that would come good and they would eventually overwhelm England. It's just a lingering trait. And I know Will Green was column afterwards, was talking about how England are athletes rather than rugby players. I think broadly that's maybe not unfair, but I think that's quite a strong way of putting it. But you certainly do think that when sides can think laterally over 80 minutes and they just have a breadth to their game, England are in trouble. And I thought that's sort of how it played out for me. Again, England's bench, thought Tom Willis made a positive impact. I think just about everyone else sort of struggled to sort of assert themselves on the game. And as we've already spoken about, Ireland's bench was fantastic. Dan Sheehan, we're super lucky, watch a lot of live sport, and every now and then you see an athlete, I mean, speaking of athletes, see an athlete that really looks different, is a different level of intensity and dynamism. Even the first two carries that Sheehan made sort of around the corner, I think one as sort of circling both ways, looked different to anything that had gone on the pitch before that. And then for his own try, which killed off the contest, to get from, he was the fourth in this really quite clever group of sort of a five-man pod that Ireland threw at England. He was the fourth man tipping on to Conan for that initial break. For him to get from there, for a hooker to get from there into the outside centre channel on the next phase, just shows what a kind of freakish operator he is.
Freakish was the exact word that was just coming into my head.
The context of the replacements matters though as well. I know you said that England's bench struggled to impose themselves, maybe other than Tom Willis, and that's right, but it felt like they were being introduced almost to try and stop the rot, to try and bail out England's bench, whereas the Irish bench was coming on just as Ireland were building, as in to just sort of accelerate that. And I think that sort of made a difference. I mean, I don't think, you know, Ollie Chesham, Joe Hayes, Finn Smith would be three who came on and were solid, but I just don't think there was much that they could have done, really. I don't think that... I know that obviously there was a few defensive errors from Cunningham South, but I think it was almost as if England had sort of emptied that tank, and then it was Ireland were taking control, and then the game was slipping away from them, and the bench were maybe sort of over trying, maybe overcompensating maybe a little bit. But that doesn't take anything away from the point, because the Irish bench is just significantly better than the English one, and the game got away from them in the last half an hour, definitely.
We've got a lot of questions about selection, so I might just leave those for the end. But just on the back row that England went with the two Currys and Ben Earl at number 8, do we think that worked? Did they get what they wanted out of that, Charles?
Well, in a way, I think they're two different questions. In a way, I think they did probably get what they wanted out of it, because all three of them, I don't think you could criticise any of the three of that back row. I think they were all outstanding, and certainly in the first half, you know, they'd outplayed the Irish back row, really. And at half time, you would have said that. And certainly, I think even on 45, 50 minutes, you would have said that. The issue is the balance of it. And they picked this quick back row to disrupt Ireland, to be physically aggressive, to challenge on the floor, which happened. But the issue was that then when they needed people to carry the ball, when they needed people to win lineouts, then they were found wanting, because they'd gone all out on this strategy, which had worked for sort of 45, 50 minutes. But I think there was only so long that was going to hold out. It was almost, this sounds a little bit reductive and a little bit negative, but it almost felt like a selection that was aimed to stop, to not lose rather than to actually win,
more positively to keep it in the balance of 50 minutes.
To keep it in the balance of 50 minutes, exactly. And the back row played the part in that, absolutely. And as I said, you couldn't criticise any of them. And I know we'll come on to selection in a minute, but I think we'd all like to see maybe certainly one, maybe two tweaks to that selection ahead of France.
Yeah. The line-out was every bit as chaotic and kind of fragile as it was feared.
Because Luke Cowan-Dickie, even in his pomp, even when he was playing the rugby of his life, that was never a super strength of his. He wasn't bad at line-out throwing by any stretch. You know, you can't be to play in that position, but it wasn't, you would not have said, Cowan-Dickie's in for his arrows. You know,
in the same way that Jamie George is.
In the same way that Jamie George is. And that was when he was at his peak. He's now not at his peak. And you've put him in a Dublin test away, under the floodlights, against a really good line-out operation led by Paul O'Connell, the coach, with only really two out-and-out line-out jumpers. I know the back row can maybe one out-and-out line-out jumper. Yeah. And it was, you know, Marrow was a good source of possession, but it was clear that England knew that he was going to be the main line-out jumper, but so did Ireland.
Yeah.
I felt like every time they won a line-out, it reminded me of when New Zealand in their pomp had Retallick and Whitelock, and then also Kieran Reid, and then also they could chuck up Ardie Surveyor. So every time Kano, yeah. Every time you won a line out against New Zealand, the throw had to be double top, and it was, the top of the jumper, top of the sort of stretch that a line out jumper would have to take it. And England got away with that a few times. However, it just the platform wasn't reliable.
Did they run a lot of four-man? I can remember a couple of four-man.
They ran a four-man, and they threw up Tom Curry, I think it was, at the front before anybody was ready, including their own backline. So it was almost an admission that this line-out isn't going to be solid enough for us to run anything off it at all.
And they also threw one to the front with no lift as well, which actually,
a couple,
under the new laws, they maybe should do more often, in all honesty.
Yeah, that's true. We don't often chat about refereeing and penalties, but there were a couple, I think, in that second half that left us slightly surprised. 2 in a row. Was it on Slade for
there's a little period where, and the thing is, we're loath to talk about it because in test matches away from home, these things happen, and you've actually got to just be better. You just got to be good enough to sort of make those setbacks not as consequential as they can be. But so I thought to penalise Slade's push on Mac Hansen was pretty soft in itself.
Yeah,
Ireland go to touch, and this is at 10-all, and Itoji's done for sort of nudging Ireland's lifter as they go up at the front. That looked very soft. First of all, it looked to me like something Ireland had highlighted to the officials before the game, just to say, look, Itoji closes the gap quite a lot.
It was also one of the worst calls I think I've ever seen.
I was waiting for you to come in hot.
It didn't look like a push at all, and
there was the intimation of a push. I think Itoje makes the body language of a push, and I can understand maybe why one of the on-field officials might have thought it was a push. However, that is absolutely a moment where the TMO has to come in. A big decision like that. This wasn't a free kick or a knock-on, or this was a full penalty that then gives Ireland the lead. I think the TMO has to come in there and go, Ben, that there was no push, because I'm not being funny. In a review on Monday, when the officials sit down, they are going to say that there was no push there, and they're going to say that they got that wrong because there was clearly no push. I don't want this to come across as sort of, hammering the officials and saying that it was the officials who cost England. They didn't at all. I think Ireland would have won anyway.
Great.
But you're already got an uphill task winning in Dublin, and they didn't get the rub of the green, let's say, in that second half.
And there were two others at 13-10. Doris on Tom Curry, I think he clocks him in the chin, and then it rides down, and that happens so quickly and alive. So I saw Tom Curry stay down, and I thought, oh, geez, is he in trouble again with concussion? And if a player isn't staying down, these days, if a player isn't genuinely hurt, they're staying down to try and get to bring attention to a high tackle that's happened. And that's exactly what I think England were doing. And he came back sort of dabbing his chin, and either they didn't look at it very carefully, or they looked at it and decided that there wasn't sufficient evidence for it. And then the last one, I think, because it happened just before the Tyg Burn try, was Cunningham South taking Keenan in the air, and there being a bit of a scuffle, and O'Keefe had just warned everybody about scrapping, and James Lowe lost his head.
Yeah.
And nothing came. And then again, at the time, I thought, well, James Lowe might be in a bit of trouble there, because that's quite... You again, seeing games, you immediately realise, a lot of the time you immediately realise something that is going to come to a referee's attention, and something that is genuinely nothing. That looked like more... It looked like a rush of blood from Lowe, who just kicked out on the full a little bit before.
The scuffle before, O'Keefe said... The next afters
is very clear.
Yellow, is what he said. Not even just a pen. Clear. He said next afters is a yellow.
Yeah.
And then James Lowe does that 5 minutes later, or however many minutes it was, and not even a penalty. And these are all the things that have built up in the second half in this, like,
which build up in the test matches away from home.
Build up either way, but when also the balance of momentum has shifted against England, it just was a recipe for disaster. Things, right? You need all those things. I think if either Doris or Lowe get yellow carded for their respective infringements, we might be looking at a different. There may have been, given how the first half went and the first 45 minutes, there may have been the chance of a comeback. We'll never know, but there may have been. I certainly, given that England in the end only lost by, they got a losing bonus point, there certainly would have been a chance, I think.
England on course for moral Grand Slam, is what we're saying.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I mean, and that is actually the real prize, isn't it, at the end of the tournament?
Yeah, when we tot it up at the end.
Before we chat a bit more about Ireland, just finally on England, those 2 late tries, getting a bonus point, I suppose that might end up being consequential.
Last time they won the Six Nations, 2020, do you remember how outplayed they were by France in France? And then Johnny May scored 2 totally ridiculous tries in garbage time. And didn't Dupont do something mad, like kick the ball out before it was actually time? And they scored. They got a burgled bonus point at the end in garbage time, and that's sort of what they've done here. Although, having said that, England got some calls when they're in the balance. There were like about 4 knock-ons in the build-up to those 2 tries, weren't there, that didn't get seen.
And we could different context, I think, now, because it doesn't. The losing bonus point might matter for, I don't know, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, maybe. But they're not going to beat France on Saturday, are they? So
you never know.
You never know. But I think we do.
Yeah, I think
never know until you do.
I think we also might do. Just to focus on Ireland for a bit, and just to James Lowe had a really interesting game, didn't he? And I'll pull back the curtain because so in my defence, I was leaving Murrayfield. I hadn't watched the first half closely because I've been wrapping up, and I was watching it on my phone walking to the tram, and I saw Lowe put those 2 kicks out on the full in fairly quick succession, and I texted both of them. I was like, I wonder if Lowe's like peaked here and whether they might think about a change. And then he kind of went off, and then he was great, wasn't he?
I was looking down at that text and looked up to see him bursting through for bonus try, I think.
Well, that's the killer ITV
timing. The Sheehan try was him as well, and the first half try was all him as well, wasn't it? He's so strong.
He's so strong, and so his acceleration away from a tackle is really remarkable. And I know there's been a lot written quite rightly about Sheehan's return from injury. He'd faced an absence, before the Six Nations.
Yeah,
to come back so strong was really
the deception really with his kind of line tucked in behind. Was it Tyburn for that break?
Beautiful.
And the way it's kind of set up was really quite pleasant, and clearly something that Ireland had plotted and planned based on how England kind of line up. Charlie, can you briefly explain that?
So it all happened, I think, from the line out after the Chandler Cunningham South early tackle on Keenan. They get a line out sort of fairly close to the middle of the pitch and send up. It might be Henshaw, I can't quite remember, but it's a slow ruck. He runs into Tom Willis and Marcus Smith. As I say, slow ruck, and they let England come around the corner. Most of England's forwards come around the corner, and then Jamison Gibson Park picks it up. He fixes Ellis Genge, who's the guard defender, and Cunningham South is set a little bit wider than that, and he's set a little bit wider than that because Byrne and Henderson are sort of set for a sort of standard little kind of a run-off 9, but James Lowe is hidden in behind, I think it's Byrne, and sort of arrives to actually be first receiver and take that pass. And because Cunningham South has drifted a bit wide, has started wide anyway, but has drifted even wider, there's a huge gap for him, and it is beautiful. It's really nice. It's sort of a little bit of a riff on the sort of hidden inside balls that they were running so sort of eye-catchingly well on the South Africa tour.
And it's so nifty that it's almost a surprise that it took them that long in the game to bring it out, really. You'd think that maybe they just didn't get the possession in the right, because it requires the right area of the field, the right sort of, it requires 2 forwards to be on the blind side.
Yeah.
And maybe they just didn't get it in there.
I wonder whether
you'd think that something that nifty and that effective you might bring out in the first half, especially when you're trailing by 5 points. And 10 points.
Yeah, there's that. I wonder whether they, because a lot of the Ireland eventually broke down England when the replacements came on, and maybe it was a sort of an awareness that England weren't going to be as coherent as those bench players started coming on. But either way, very clever, very Ireland.
Just really enjoyed it. In terms of fly half, Prendergast had the start and had a nice kind of wide ball for Bundyaki's try, didn't he? Bless him, he got absolutely steamrolled by Ollie Lawrence on making one tackle. And then Crowley came on, and I thought Crowley was actually, arguably more impressive with how he sort of closed out the final stages. So I think we thought for the tournament that Prendergast might just be given the run of it, but actually either of you, might they tinker, do you think, and could they go Crowley instead?
They could, although they've just beaten England with a bonus point, and that was it's an 80-minute performance, and that's the balance of selection that they've chose. Prendergast had his moments, but I think it would be unfair for him to become a lightning rod for criticism in that first half, because I think there were a few Irish players really who were off the boil, let's say, and England were doing a very good job at disrupting them and getting into them. I think I actually wrote this in that Lions piece I mentioned. I think Prendergast might have a higher ceiling than Crowley, but I certainly think it's. I mean, if you're just doing sort of out and out player ratings, taking that 80-minute performance into one, then yes, Crowley would have had a higher score, I think, than Prendergast. But Prendergast also did do some nice things that get forgotten. There was a couple of lovely passes, so I can see them maintaining that sort of double act that they had for the rest of the tournament. I don't think they will want to do anything rash after one game. However, if they went to Murrayfield, started Prendergast and lost, then maybe they might look at changing things up a bit. Just one thing that I wanted to mention, and you mentioned it there, Ollie Lawrence. I thought he was excellent.
Yeah, he was.
It was one of his better games for England, and I think there had been question marks around him. And I know this is a bit of a segue. I think there had been question marks around him, but I thought he was excellent on Saturday. Really, really good.
Scotland Ireland is a really nice little tasty game next Sunday, isn't it? I'm quite looking forward to that. Gregor Townsend was actually asked afterwards, because he hasn't beaten Ireland yet as coach. He was like, what have you got to do, Gregor, to beat Ireland? He just went, score more points than them, which I quite enjoyed but with a smile in it and a laugh.
Don't, it's fine. No, it's
don't
fine
roll
if you're
your
joking.
eyes,
it's heartbreaking when you do a big preview piece and somebody always comments like how X can be
No,
X.
it was very much.
No, that's fine.
I'm aware of my terrible record against Ireland, and we need to get one over them.
And aware of whatever Scotland say in the build-up, they get rinsed for being arrogant.
Oh yeah,
in this fixture. This fixture's good is because I think it's the one with the most needle in the whole competition.
They don't like each other.
I think they genuinely don't like each other most.
Yeah, and that's good,
which is great.
We want more of that. You touched on England against France, and just as before we dive more into France, but we're just thinking about France against England on Saturday. So, Charles, what I'm hearing from you is that there is not a prayer for England. Is that the vibe?
Yeah, I think that's the smart money. I think, look, England at home, they are not far from being a good side. I would say they are not far away from that, and stranger things have happened. However, if you just base it on the evidence of last weekend, France surely will not be slipping up at Twickenham, and will surely go to Dublin in round 4, and that will be a Grand Slam decider, surely. Providing that Ireland obviously win in Murrayfield. That French 23, and we've talked about the bench, Ireland's bench, France's bench, also incredibly strong, and I just don't see how England can cope with that. I don't think I think they should change the starting 15. They should also make tweaks to the bench for the greater good of the whole tournament, but I don't think it's going to be enough to beat France at Twickenham on Saturday. It's with how they developed into that Welsh game, with how ruthless they were, with how quick. I mean, one thing that England aren't blessed with is like pace, out and out pace across the board. I think they have quick players, and certainly Slightholme is one of them. He might come back in, whereas that French back three, and even that like Jalabert is likely to start at fly half because Antimac's likely to be suspended. He is also rapid. Dupont is rapid. Pierre-Louis Brassi rapid. Mofana is probably one of the quicker 12s. He's not rapid, but he's played on the wing for France. You've got Penaud, Bielbiere, Ramos, a quick back row. They've been playing a flanker at the second row. They played a flanker at the second row. So this tactic that England had against Ireland of outrunning them and just running and playing really, really fast, I think they are going to have to do that against France, because I think if they go the other way, then it's going to be like it was in 2023. However, I still don't think it's going to be enough.
Yeah, so England needs to be faster and bigger
and stronger.
Yeah, than they are.
In 5 days.
Yeah,
in 5 days, which is totally achievable. I mean, so Charles, if they haven't got a prayer, what about the wins target? What about the target of 4 wins, which always seemed completely like a sane and normal target to set? They're not going to make it.
No, and they might not. I mean, as I said, the betting man would say they're not going to.
Yeah.
But I mean, I still think they then finish the tournament regardless of what happens on Saturday. I still think they finish the tournament on a high. I still think they beat Scotland and Italy at Twickenham, and I think they go to Cardiff and win. And I think they'll finish probably third. There is a chance of second, obviously, with that bonus point in Dublin helping out, depending on how many tries they score in the other games. Look, it would be really interesting for the hashtag narrative of the championship if England were to win on Saturday. I just can't see it.
I love how France did that to Wales without Donty or Ficou or Penaud and potentially
Flamand.
And there's so many gun players, Olivon. There's so many players who could come back into that side who then elevate them even further, aren't there? What did you like about France on Friday night briefly?
To be a bit left field maybe about it, sort of talking to the point you're making there, how players slotted in and looked at home. So Atsogbe on one wing looks like he's a young guy, but really kind of instinctive finisher on the same wavelength as Dupont straight away, which is impressive. I thought Barassi sort of on another kind of tack. Barassi has the existing cohesion, doesn't he, with the Toulouse players around him. I thought he was really just businesslike and really tough in midfield. Really
there was a bit of sort of almost Conrad Smith about him. Not quite as good
because of his hair,
but not just because of his hair, and not just because he played well. And I'm not drawing a comparison of that stature, but it felt like he does the nuts and bolts really well. But he is also a ball in hand threat, and it just seemed that everything sort of slotted in better around him while he was there.
Well, it was your sort of breakout player, isn't he? And he's 25, 26, isn't he? So it's exactly what you want from a player coming in when I think only 6 caps before the tournament or a handful of caps before the tournament, but looked really assured and looked really kind of settled within the way France want to play, which is kind of France and Ireland. And this is going to look really dumb when England and Scotland win on the weekend, but it does feel like France and Ireland are on a different plane to any other team. And what that means selection-wise is that players like Sam Prendergast and Theo Atsogbe can come in and just be bolstered by this kind of infrastructure of the team around them.
You're not coming in to be match winners, are you, necessarily? You're just there to fit into the machine.
Because everything else is working so nicely, whereas England are sort of making wholesale changes sometimes and big, drastic tactical changes on the basis of almost fumbling for what A, their best team is, and B, a kind of effective way to play.
Yeah, for England, it seems like the change. This is sort of what the point I was getting at about the replacements. That the people coming in are almost the saviours, as it were, to try and save the day. Whereas with France, the new guy, it's the next cab off the rank, and it's as you were, and do your best. And more often than not, their best is excellent.
Before we dissect Friday night even more, can you see any hope for England either on Saturday?
Strange things have happened, you know. I think if they take them deep, I wasn't as blown away by France as I wasn't as impressed as you were, just because I thought Wales dug in for that first 20, and I think a little bit of we speak, don't we, about the Six Nations first round being a race to get ready for that, and I think France are better suited to that first round because they have that existing cohesion of a strong Toulouse side, and then they also have utter individual brilliance that can almost bail them out a little bit when they get a bit clunkier.
I think that's certainly what bailed them out at that 20-minute mark when the scores was still 0-0.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it was individual brilliance, and then the floodgates opened.
Yeah,
absolutely. But as I said, I wasn't like bowled over by them, but I just think they've nilled Wales in the Six Nations without getting out of third gear, really.
I think England have put together a lot of good stuff now, both home and away. And I think being back at Twickenham will be a boost for them for a first game of Six Nations campaign. And I just think it is a little bit psychologically of a shot to nothing, because nobody really, I don't think, few people expect them to win. And I think the reward of winning would be them to be right back in a chat for the championship. And I think they can sort of stir something from that. I'm really interested to see how they go about it.
Yeah. A quick pause and then a bit more on France, Wales and Scotland, Italy.
Go.compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby Podcast. Go.Compare is a proud sponsor of the WRU, offering support across all levels of rugby. We are big believers in the importance of grassroots rugby, and that's why we partnered with Telegraph Media Group to launch the Making a Difference campaign. From volunteers to groundsmen, referees to coaches, we wanted to celebrate the people who are really making a difference and reward them with £5,000 for their club to improve the grassroots game. Go to telegraph.co.uk/making a difference to find out more about the grassroots heroes who won our prize pot this year. Go.Compare. Feel the deal.
Just like rugby, running a business takes grit, hard work, and a great team behind you. That's where Funding Circle comes in. As sponsors of Premiership Rugby, they're backing businesses like yours with access to fast, hassle-free finance to help you thrive. From coffee shops to kit manufacturers, they backed over 100,000 businesses with more than £13 billion since 2010. To find out how Funding Circle can help get your business goals over the line, visit fundingcircle.com/rugby.
Okay, Charles, we've heard about Marseillaise. We've heard about what France did well. I want to know if you saw anything out of Wales where you were like, okay, this hasn't been great, but you can take that and build on that going into Rome this week.
Well, I mean, I wrote this in my report that I had to send in and publish before the press conferences, and it was echoed absolutely by Warren Gatland and Jack Morgan in the press conferences. But I did think they showed an absolute bucket load of heart and graft, and their work ethic was unquestionable. It wasn't a team that had given up. It was maybe a team that were lacking in confidence and lacking in cutting edge, but it certainly wasn't a team that were shying away from a challenge or who thought that they were, when their backs to the wall, they thought that it was all done and dusted and they'd chuck the towel in. It wasn't them at all. They were just totally outclassed. And I wrote this in the report, is that at half time when you're sitting there, and I don't know what you'd say as a coach. I mean, if there's a third series of Six Nations Full Contact not on Netflix, then we might find out what was said in that dressing room. But I'm just not quite sure what you would have said as a coach, because really you've given it all. You've held them for sort of 20 minutes. You've grafted and grafted and grafted, all of you, 1 to 15, and yet the game's over. Bonus point before half time, and you could, just because fundamentally they have better players, and I'm not quite sure what you do about that.
And you've got the disaster of losing Wainwright and Watkin so early as well.
That
sort of key figures at 8 and 12, and midfield's already a problem area for you. Yes,
especially when there's no Max Llewellyn, and losing Wainwright that early on didn't help. But then Tommy Reffell came on and actually played really well, particularly in that first half, and made a sort of instant impact. But then James Botham looked good, Jack Morgan looked good. The scrum held up just about. The scrum pretty well first half, and then ironically Nicky Smith, who's probably one of the best scrummagers in the Championship, came on and got pinged a couple of times. And they looked like a team who wanted to work hard. They looked like a team who were pretty sort of harmonious with each other, and they looked like they were willing to work hard for each other, and that there was a good sort of camaraderie and work ethic, and they'd built a good team. I emphasise that word. Yet they just got blown away. Yeah. And I'm not really sure what you say. And it, as I said earlier on at the start, that was sort of expected, really. So I don't think it means very much for Italy this weekend. I don't think it means anything. I don't think that result, that performance means anything for Italy, because I think that was always sort of going to happen. I don't think being nilled isn't great, and it is quite humiliating. But I don't think the context of the Italy match has changed one bit for what happened in Paris on Friday night.
And it's a good thing the way that they're not in Wales this week. They're in Nice in a training camp, kind of away from the noise of it. They can kind of block out everything, build up that kind of siege mentality, which I think they need. I think they're going to need that kind of motivation to get up for this game in Rome. There's no recall for Max Llewellyn in midfield, despite kind of Owen Watkins' uncertainty about his injury. It doesn't necessarily sound as bad as first looked, because it did look quite bad, didn't it?
It looked really bad, and in the press conference afterwards, Warren Gatland was worried. Let's say obviously it's difficult. You don't do these sort of diagnoses there and then, and it's tough to have an absolute conclusion. But he wasn't an optimistic man regarding either Wainwright or Watkins. So I'm very surprised that Llewellyn hasn't been called up yet.
There's sort of a wider sadness to this, isn't there, Charlie? In that it's not a surprise at all that result kind of happened, and even being nilled actually doesn't completely shock me because of where Wales are with this run of 13 defeats in a row. Do you think they have enough to win in Rome on the weekend? No, I don't. I think that you touched on it there. The kind of predictability of how they played was, as in we could foreshadow that they might be quite blunt beforehand, because you've got Ben Thomas starting Test matches at 10 when that's not a familiar, one game there all season,
not a familiar position for him. He was super deep behind the gain line. They don't have the athleticism to do that, to play in that way, to go sweep from coast to coast as say Scotland do. They have the cohesion and the dynamism to do that, and it was reasonably easy for kind of France to swallow them up around that middle third, and that's actually what gave England. That's what actually gave France the energy to sort of really overwhelm them eventually after that opening sort of quarter.
I wonder if the one thing about Wales, which I did think, was that in the autumn they were quite callow, weren't they? It was quite a raw side, and this is a team where you had Josh Adams back and Liam Williams back and Nick Tompkins back. Like, these are kind of seasoned vets, seasoned pros, and you still got the same kind of outcome. That would be something that I would worry about slightly. Just on France, so it wasn't a perfect night because we had the red card from an Intermac for a high shot on Ben Thomas, which was, I think, red all day long. I don't think anyone's got any arguments about that.
It was actually just a question of whether it was a 20-minute red or a full red.
Or a straight one. Yeah. But in a weird way, is that actually not a terrible position for France to lose someone? Because, and I'm sure you two want to see loads of Dupont and Tomat together, but actually, you've got Jalibert there. You can bring Ramos up from fullback. Like, they've got options there, haven't they?
Massively. It's a strange one, isn't it? Because any other team, it would be properly doom and gloom to lose your fly half, and it sort of is with them in that, despite the strength of their options, I mean, obviously Jalibert's superb and has orchestrated a phenomenal French performance against England at Twickenham, the one that we mentioned earlier, that actually just fell short, but it was still a magnificent performance. And Ramos was there during the autumn where they beat New Zealand. For all of that, their best performances, and certainly their Grand Slam by and large, was with Ntamack at 10. And so it is a blow. I don't think it weakens them that much. I don't think we're now looking at the playing field leveled up. The talk from in the French press is that it is going to be Jalibert, because if they move Ramos to 10, then they would have to move BL to 15, bring Penaud back and keep Atisogbe. And I think genuinely that is to do with what we've just mentioned, in that I think that is therefore even weaker aerially, that back three, and they are expecting probably an English bombardment. And I think that without Ramos at 15, they're even weaker aerially, and I don't think they want to open themselves up to that. So I think they'll bring Jalibert in at 10, keep Ramos, and then Atisogbe 2 tries in the Six Nations and dropped for Damien Penaud. Yeah, I think is what they will end up doing.
Not enough. If he'd scored more, who knows? What would you like to know about Scotland against Italy, Charlie?
How tense was it at 19-all?
Yeah, quite tense. Murrayfield went quiet, actually, and full credit to Italy, because they started poorly, and when they conceded those 2 tries within 9 minutes, I was thinking, oh man, I don't really want to be watching like an Italy regression during this championship. I want to see
I'm not
progress, or at least the same as last year. And I was, when old Nacho Brex missed a tackle on Duan van der Merwe to set up the first Jones try, I thought, oh no, well, if you're missing tackles like that, then we are in trouble. And then fair play to Italy, they settled really well defensively. They made so many tackles. They had about 106 by half time to Scotland's 30, and I think in the end they paid for that. But at the same time, it was the strength of that defence at the start of the second half which forced a turnover penalty. Tommy Allen was kicking them absolutely nails everywhere. Like, I was so impressed with his goal kicking. That got them to...
They're giving up on Garbisi's dodgy tee.
Well, Garbisi's just seems to be good from the 35 and in, and so I think they've just thought, give it to Tommy Allen. And then Brex made the intercept on a really bad Finn Russell shovel pass to Hugh Jones, which I hated because I watched it and thought, don't, when you see them, don't pass, don't do that one.
Wasn't his greatest day at the office, was it, Finn?
No, it wasn't at all. No, and I think actually the fact that go on, Charlie.
I just saw a really funny. It was from Willow, and to give it its due, really sharp tweet on Finn Russell was that performance was how his detractors think he plays all the time. When actually he's now a guy who plays the percentages a lot and knows the right area, he's so good at picking the right passes, but I agree. He was a lot flakier than he has been for years and years and years.
But what I liked about it in a perverse way or in a weird way was that actually it doesn't all rest on Finn anymore for Scotland to win or to get themselves out of holes like that. Because Scotland, 10 years ago, probably lose that game. But actually others then stepped up and picked up the mantle. A 19-all, it was tense, but then Darcy Graham does what he does and Hugh Jones is over. I thought Hugh Jones' finish for his hat-trick try was really great power as well. And they didn't wobble like a Scottish side of the past might have done. And there was lots to like from Hugh Jones and the way he picks those support lines. Gregor Townsend made a really good point afterwards, which is that actually he's probably missed out on about 5 or 6 tries in the autumn because he was running those lines and just didn't get the ball, and today was just his day. Rory Targe is great. I just really like him. If I was picking a Lions squad, which I might do after this podcast using the Telegraph's Lions squad selector, do I get paid extra for that? Let's hope so. Then I would probably have Darge in there because I love his carrying, his defensive work. He makes turnovers. He's developed into a really good, he's officially a co-captain, developed into a really good leader. So yeah, Scotland good. And can
they break the Irish duck?
If Finn plays better, then maybe. I didn't think Stafford McDowell was necessarily amazing inside centre, and they missed 2 Pelosi there.
Tom Jordan's stock rose from the bench, right?
They actually looked sharper when they went Tom Jordan and Finn at 10 and 12, because I think Tom Jordan adds a lot in terms of from a distribution point of view, and they seem to play with a bit more width and just executed a bit better with him on. So that might be one to monitor. They've got a chance. I wouldn't necessarily say it's not like France against England where France are 100% banking. No, I think Scotland have got a sniff. And if I'm Italy, I'm not overly worried because they attacked way below par. As in, they're much, much better than that attacking wise. They just didn't really get going. I think they were quite narrow. They couldn't get their shape. I think an interesting point of how they've evolved as a side compared to your Kieran Crowley days where they were mad, weren't they? They literally just ran it from everywhere. Is that Copper Watson took a high ball just inside his half at one point, I think in the first half, and I was like, oh, here we go. He's going to do some sort of magic. And he just sent up a bomb. And I was like, oh, okay. You're not the Italy of 2 years ago. You're a bit more measured now, because you would never expect him to do that 2 years ago. So they're an interesting side who I really like watching. They've got lots of great characters. Fichetti's a great loosehead prop. That's not news, but comes up with gun turnovers.
On the ball, yeah.
He's just so good. So yeah,
rapid as well.
If you're Italy, don't feel too disheartened. I think you're definitely favourites in Rome. And if you're Scotland, survive the scare without your talisman playing that well.
Chat blanket, Blair Kinghorn. Yeah, gradually sort of more and more important for them. You're talking about another outlet. He was sort of key to how they're moving.
Also so good in the air.
Yeah.
Don't think he dropped one, did he?
No, he's remarkable. I mean, he's got the kind of, not that it's all about your height, but he does have that frame in the air where you would back him to win contested catches just because he's got so much size, doesn't he?
I remembered to put him on the lines talk.
I was going to say lines fullback.
You didn't do any of it, you said.
Yeah, so you definitely didn't. Lines fullback at the minute, as Ficky's got the jersey, as things stand.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, Hugo Keenan will want a word, but I mean, yeah, I think he has to be. I think there's loads of Scottish players who are in contention for test starts and will be on the plane. And if they win against Ireland, then wow, that changes how some of those players are perceived massively as well, doesn't it? Because then I think their stock just skyrockets. So yeah, that was the opening weekend. Right, everybody, we have a Lions summer coming up later this year. Head coach Andy Farrell was in Dublin over the weekend, having a look at some potential tourists in the Ireland versus England game. And now, over on the Telegraph website, we're giving you this opportunity to play the role of Lions head coach. Our Lions squad selection tool is now live and will keep running up until when the squad is named, so we can now hear from some Lions royalty. Serene McGeechan and Brian Moore, in conversation with our chief rugby correspondent Gavin Mayers. They're discussing some of the potential wildcard picks for this year's tour.
The wildcard selection for our readers again is a lovely little tweak. It's any position, so it can be any position that we've left out or overlooked. For me, and it's probably in getting to the end of the backline selection, I've gone for Jamie Osborne, and who again, as we saw in South Africa last summer, can play fullback and did so magnificently against the Springboks, but also is a powerful midfield player and another player that we've seen Andy Farrell invest a lot into and has come through. And it's tricky getting into that Leinster back line at the minute, but he's a player for me that he's young, powerful, utility-wise, can answer a lot of questions that may arise during the Lions tour. But interesting to hear your wildcard picks.
I'll give three names, and so I'd show you where my bit is open in a way, a little bit. I think Tommy Freeman is a player who can meet different criteria for what you might want under pressure on a Lions tour. So he was well to the fore in my thinking when I was looking at back three. And
you realise people were saying this is because you used to be a Saints coach, see, bias, see.
I know, yeah. The other one, yeah, strange enough, is Henry Pollock.
Oh!
But you talk about a moment, it's not international, and I understand that, but he's under 20s, and just seeing him for Northampton, and he's the one player who is left field in the back row who would make a difference in saying, would he make a difference? Yeah. Therefore, I'd have to seriously consider him. And the third one, which is left field, who I just love watching, is Ebotoye for Bristol.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there are two genuine bolters, as in classically defined. My one about Jack Willis is simply because, a lot of people will definitely have him as a starter in a test series. And I understand that. Yeah. My reluctance for that was the French connection. Yeah. Had it not been for that, then I think I would have done that. It was just for that reason.
Right, lads, that was who Geech and Brian Moore and Gav were thinking about for their respective wild cards. What did you make of their choices? So Gav went Jamie Osborne. We had Henry Pollock for Geech, and Brian Moore lastly with Jack Willis. Could you see any of those in there, Charlie?
Do you know what? I had Willis and I had Osborne in my squad, and we've spoken about Pollock's swagger before, so yeah, obviously, I think they're three really strong.
Pollock would be amazing, wouldn't it? If he completed that arc from under 20s Six Nations.
You can see them all. Jack Willis, as has been mentioned, and I don't want to be too much of a downer on this, but his if he's in the top 14 final with Toulouse, which is very likely, then it's going to be tough for him, I think, because then if we're saying that Kinghorn is probably going to be in as well, then that would mean Andy Farrell basically sacrificing 2 selection spots for the flight over, and I think the first, maybe even the second game. But I could see Pollock and Jamie Osborne, excellent player, just obviously not, as Gav said, not playing internationally at the minute, but has done. But that shouldn't rule him out.
And now it's time for our wild cards. I'm going to start with you, Charles, because you stole mine.
Okay.
Who would be your wildcard pick for the Lions tour?
I'm going to go. I'm going to take wildcard as the most literal definition, and I'm going to go with Tom Jordan, the Glasgow fly half, who has also played fullback and now 12 for Scotland. And it's that I think he's a very classy player anyway. Obviously led the Warriors to the URC. But I think it's that versatility, that 10, 12, 15, which makes him quite valuable for a squad where you are limited on your numbers. I don't think necessarily we're talking a test starter here. I don't necessarily think he'll be in the 23, but in terms of a left field selection who might end up on the plane to play a squad role or to play a midweek role with that versatility, then I think he's he's certainly a contender.
Charlie, who have you gone for?
I took wildcard to mean sort of you get to the end of picking your squad and then you try and fit one in. And I just threw in Aaron Wainwright. I think he's just maybe a little bit different to the other back row was that I had in my selection. At his best, super athletic, will get a few hard grounds in Australia to carve up on. So yeah, he's my guy.
Wildcard's tricky, isn't it? Because you want to go with someone who is off the radar or is in such an area of where there's strength in depth that it might be a bit of a battle for them to get on, which is sort of how I've ended up on David Jenkins for Wales, because I think he is very talented. Obviously, was Wales captain last Six Nations, which is why saying he's a wildcard is a bit ridiculous. But Loch is such a busy area with the Irish contingent of McCarthy, Ryan, and Byrne and Baird as well, maybe. And then you've got England, you've got Itoje, Martin, Chesham. So you're kind of running out of spots quickly. But I do just really like Jenkins' kind of graft. I think it's Rob Baxter has been insistent that he will end up being a Lion kind of at some point, whether it's this tour or the next. But I could see him sneaking in on this tour with what he offers. So yeah, those are our wildcards. If you want to see the video in full of Serene McGeechan, Brian Moore and Gavin Mears discussing their picks, head over to the Telegraph YouTube channel, which that video is now live and you can watch that. And if you fancy picking your own Lions squad and comparing it to some of our experts, get over to the Telegraph website now and you can use the selection tool. Right, let's wrap things up as ever with some of your questions. Okay, time for your questions. Thank you very much for sending them in as promptly as you did on Sunday night and on Monday morning. We're going to start, because there were so many questions about selection, we've sort of left our selection chatter for this part of the podcast. So well done for hanging on in there and getting to this point. But we'll start with Sam. Do England have a problem at fullback? Stewart too slow 1-on-1, but take him off on the high ball becomes a serious threat. I think what Sam is referring to is getting skinned by Gibson Park in a very similar way to the way he got skinned by Grant Williams in the autumn. I can't remember which pundit it was on the ITV coverage. It might have been Brian O'Driscoll, who was sort of pointing out how because of Stewart's lack of pace, he's almost a bit scared to leave the outside open to being stepped. So now teams are just stepping him on the inside and he sort of looks like he's stuck in treacle. Charlie, you, not to pull back the curtain too much again, but we were having this chat briefly yesterday about what to do at fullback. So what would you do?
I think if it's the game, if you're gonna play Marcus Smith at fullback and you're curious about that as an option, then you do it in this game, because France tend to kick longer and have done throughout Galtier's tenure. And if you're making them kick contestably, then you're potentially taking away a big strength of theirs. So, I think I'd go for that this week. Although, having said that, Ireland, as soon as Finn Smith came on and Marcus Smith went back, Jack Crowley was on and they won the won the sort of battle for territory. Just really what Crowley's fantastic at that. And they've got James Lowe, Hugo Keenan can find space, Gary, all of those players can find space. And Thomas Ramos hit a gorgeous 50-22 against Wales. And so France will test them positionally, but I just think England are so enthralled to kick return as a source of attack that why don't they just go the whole hog and make sure that Marcus Smith is getting as much ball as possible and have him there. And they also, I think they just do look more structurally sound with the ball when Finn Smith is on. When Marcus Smith is on and you're watching it from where our press seats, he isn't necessarily as engaged with his forwards and as a lot of other 10s. So that sort of weakens the phase attack quite a lot, because it's only really ever going through them or to Marcus Smith. So yeah, that's why I'd go. Long story short, I think I'd go Marcus Smith. Just have a look at it.
I would as well. I'd also go Smith, but that is not. I think Stewart and also Caden Murley, who we've not mentioned yet, have been sort of harshly dealt.
I wanted to ask about Murley. The in-goal gaffes are sort of one thing, and I'd love to know for the second one if he's getting a bit of help from Marcus Smith, who was sort of like tracking back in the area, if he's getting any communication, because I can't see on the replays. I wanted to bring up Murley just because it felt like England let a lot of high balls drop in that second half or bounce. Like, what's that about?
Yeah, I mean, it's just plain misjudgment. I mean, the first error, there were two howlers from Murley, admittedly. Like, let's not beat about the bush. The first one was, he had to play that out because he knew that he'd touched it, which is just a simple misjudging of the flight of the ball. And then the second one, we don't quite know what he was doing there. I think it's sort of a bit of a, it's just an error, isn't it? But what I would say is, other than that, I was pretty impressed. It's difficult to say that you were impressed by him when he's made 2 gaffes like that, but I thought he was actually pretty good. He carried the ball very well, and he did look sharp with the ball in hand.
Defended well.
He defended well. And it obviously set up 1, maybe 2 tries. Well, scored 1 himself, set up another. And I thought Stewart gets sort of, he gets a lot of criticism for this sort of turning circle, but when scrum halves like Grant Williams and Jameson Gibson Park are in behind like that because of missed tackles that have come earlier on, it is incredibly difficult for any fullback to stop that. That's not a Stewart thing. I'm not sure Furbank, I'm not sure some of the best fullbacks in the world would have stopped Jameson Gibson Park there because the damage had already been done, the missed tackle on low, and once Ireland or any good team are in behind on a one-on-one like that, it's a hiding to nothing that you're onto. So Stewart, I'm not sure Stewart is right for the France game, but I'm not dropping him in inverted commas per se, because he was very handy. That restart did work. The restart tactic of sending him up for and tapping back, that did work.
They've done that very well with Freeman as well.
Yeah, yes, they have done that. I don't think they're as good as Stewart.
Mike pointed that out in his question, so I wanted to flag that as well, because I think Mike said that he won like 2 out of 3 restarts with just Stewart getting there and getting there early, which is a good point. Ted also asked about the 10s. So we've all got Finn Smith in our hypothetical 15s, I think, for the weekend, except I've kept Stewart at fullback, just because I want to see Finn Smith running that back line as it is. But Ted wanted to know, was it time to bring George Ford back in, who I did sort of see on the dressing room footage. I think he was there in Dublin just as part of the
There's a case for it, and one of the first things Steve Borthwick sort of reached for at the end was, they had Jack Crowley was sort of was pivotal in this game. How good for Ireland to have a fly half of that class, and I think he even mentioned experience to bring on, and you're thinking,
the experience point we didn't get to yet, but that was sort of on my radar as well. About
peculiar for me.
Just to sum that up, was it Borthwick saying that we've got 80 caps on the bench?
I mean, it is a statement of facts, but also it didn't stop them from winning last year at Twickenham, did it? Against the same team.
And also, he could have had Ford. He could have had how many caps has Davey got? Like 60 odd caps.
Ford played enough rugby?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. But I guess I just didn't. I didn't really buy into that explanation as much as. So it might not be time for Ford yet. A question from Emilio, who says he flagged this a year ago and we dismissed it. Sorry, Emilio. That was good. Apology. Well done. That was in sync as well without looking at each other.
It's the contrition.
He says that England do not have quality at prop, centre and lack ballast. This is the problem. I think we can then, in terms of prop and centre...
Doesn't he ask the question below that?
He says, how much do you think this is coaching and how much is lack of top quality players?
I think it's a fair point in certain positions.
It's not an easy question because
the centre point's annoying because Lawrence has just had a great game,
but I'm not sure there's great depth there. I.e., is Slade Lawrence the best centre combination?
It's better than fullback depth.
And if it is not, then who's coming in? And presumably, if we're saying that Lawrence has had a good game, which he did, then Slade's going. Who's coming in for Slade? And are they really a world beater? And are they really going to be a world beating centre composition?
Beard's the other 13 in the squad who was in the England A side.
It looks very promising.
But there's a vacuum there in terms of experience. And then further down than that, Max Ajomo is a 12, stroke 13 that they're really fond of. But his question on the coaching and whether it's a player's problem or a coaching problem, I think sometimes the coaching and the tactics, certainly for the first 50 minutes, the selection and how England went about it sort of made the sort of even things out, was a leveler.
Yeah.
So but then you think, are they too blinkered? Were the changes made at the right time? Or is that a problem? Do they just not have the players to bring off the bench? It's not an easy answer at the minute for England.
Charles, you teased it earlier, but in terms of the back row and tweaks you might make. So just to quickly go through who we've got in the back row, I think I would bring back in that selection for Ireland felt like very much a selection for Ireland and not necessarily what I think England will do long term. So I would have Chesham and Tom Curry, who was excellent with 3 turnovers, and I'd have Tom Willis from the start at number 8.
I'd have basically the same, but I'd swap Tom and Ben.
You'd have Ben.
I'd have Ben starting with
Ben Curry.
Ben Curry.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes, not Ben Earl. Ben Curry starting at 7, with Tom Willis at 8, and with Ollie Chesham at 6. And that's not a statement or a slight on the performances of Ben Earl or Tom Curry. I'd have them both on the bench, and they will both come on probably quite early into the second half to add experience and aggression and dynamism to that second half performance. I just think that English back row is imbalanced at the minute, and I think they need, with George Martin, I think they need an out-and-out line-out jumper there, which is Ollie Chesham, and I think they need a frontline ball carrier, because we've said this so many times, they don't have enough frontline ball carriers in that 15, across the entire 15, who can run off slow ball, who can run into big lads and go forward and create momentum. And Tom Willis is one of those. At the minute, you're looking at it, it's just sort of really, it's Ellis Genge in that pack on Saturday. George Martin, for all of, for how big he is and how strong he is and how hard he hits, is not incredible with the ball in his hands. Maritoje is better in sort of wider out in more space. Same could be said of Earl, although his feet sometimes get him out of holes. I think they need more grunt, they need more ballast, and I think Tom Willis brings that, certainly. And I think Chesham does as well to an extent, although he, again, arguably is better out in the wide channels. And I think Ben Curry, just because he's a bit more of an out-and-out 7, competes ferociously at ruck time, and I think then you could bring on Earl and Tom Curry together, which is a luxury that other teams are having, and we're sitting here going, wow, look at the other team's benches. Well, I think if Ben Curry, Tom Curry was on the England bench, we'd be saying it the same about the England bench.
Yeah, you can sort of see Ben Earl being...
Sorry, Ben Earl and Tom Curry.
You can see Ben Earl being like...
Confusing.
Ben Curry. Ben Earl and Tom Curry, with Ben Curry starting.
If you're asking me who is like England's Jack Conan potentially, then it is kind of Ben Earl in my head in terms of someone who just come on and explodes into the game. Sorry, Charlie, your back row.
I mean, my head's been in a mess with this. I think I've filed it about 3 times, and so I would be announcing the team, and then actually sort of recalling it and apologising.
I would
to
love
players,
that press conference where you were on the top table going, "Sorry, the team I said earlier, I've had a thing. I've had a thing,
and it's not that." I eventually settled on a similar thing. I split the Curry twins, had Ben Curry go back to the bench again. No slight in his performance. Thought he was excellent, but would just sort of I would charge him with having his first half an hour at the end of the game. I think the idea that Tom Willis grows into games and is familiar with French opposition from his little stint at UBB makes a lot of sense. And yeah, he can be that keynote guy. I thought he was probably the only replacement, maybe with Finn Smith, who actually asserted themselves on the game on Saturday. So yeah, my starting back row would be Chesham. Again, just think England need more help with the line out. I'd keep Tom Curry starting if he's not too worn down by that. So I'd have Ben Curl. Ben Earl and Ben Curry on the bench.
Massive future ahead of Ben Curl.
With Ted Hill.
Yeah, Ted Hill. I want to see some.
I think we had it somewhere in the office last week. We had a Maiden Curly.
Yeah,
which is fantastic.
Well, there you go. Final question, Giles. Charlie, you like cricket, don't you? So this is for you.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't like cricket. He loves it.
Oh, very good. Giles wants to know: are back rows like winning the toss in Test cricket? I'm thinking about bowling and then batting. He says. So, like picking through open sides and then opting for balance.
As in, they determine how you want to play.
Guess so.
Yeah. Well, a little bit. I don't know. Maybe needs a bit to sort of refine that analogy a little bit more. But I think it certainly. So, for example, England picking the 2 Currys and Earl was a sort of foreshadowed the fact that they were probably going to be more comfortable without the ball harrying Ireland. It certainly foreshadowed the fact that they were sort of surrendering their line out platform a little bit. Whereas, say, if they're going to go with Chesham, one of those 3, and Tom Willis, they will be prioritising their line out, and they will want a little bit more punch in phase attack when they've got the ball, and they might actually. I think Tom Willis coming in will give them a little bit of solidity from restarts as well, which is quite handy. That talking about momentum swings, Earl dropping one cold after they scored the first try is one of the ones in the game, isn't it? So yeah, maybe come back next week. Just with a little
give us a week, Giles,
to
sort of to think about it, ruminate on it.
Can I just very quick? I know we're doing questions, but can we just end on one sort of maybe slightly positive note, which is
Georgia winning 110-0 against Switzerland?
That's very positive.
Because I was going to mention that. I was going to mention that record.
No, it was more. Obviously, we all think that France are, complete favourites, huge favourites for Saturday at Twickenham. What briefly can we distill it down? Needs to go right for England to win.
Lock Dupont on the bus.
That's not very positive.
Would be my first recommendation, I guess.
Got to not. I mean, the losing so comprehensively, losing the kicking battle between sort of minutes 45 and 60 was pretty crippling. Getting a few home calls would be would be nice. Very, very handy.
It's Nika Mashikeli, is it, referee on Saturday, I believe, for Georgian?
I was going to say
doesn't mind
friend
attacking
of the pod.
breakdown.
Yeah.
Does he? So maybe handy for England's continuity when they do get attacking platforms. So maybe that's sort of more of a case for going Chesham and Tom Willis in the starting as opposed to going really hard at the breakdown, which is what they're obviously thinking of with O'Keefe. They've just got to be super, super ruthless when they do get attacking chances. I think that's just a huge thing.
Yeah, finish your chances and yeah, just be super. I would sum it up like that.
Quick shout out to Guillaume Dufy for taking me to an interview in Paris on Friday on the back of his scooter, by the way.
He actually sent a late question, and he said, well, not really a question, he said, can you congratulate Charles for the quality of the restaurant he found in Paris? What a guide. I like how you were Guillaume's guide to a restaurant in Paris and not the other way around.
Well, the thing is, I always want him to be my guide, and then he actually just leaves it to me. So I say always, like I'm always there and that I always meet up with him, which is just not true at all. But I mean, he a great guy. He's L'Equipe's English speaking journalist who follows England, and he'll be there at Le Crunch on Saturday. Well, he was there in Dublin as well.
Right, that's all for today. Thanks to Charlie. Thanks to Charles. So where are you this weekend, the pair of you?
So between Pennyhill Park and Twickenham.
Twickenham, Charles?
Same as me.
I will be in Rome for Italy-Wales, which is full of spice. We should do what we did last time and pick our winners. So Italy-Wales, Charlie?
Italy.
It's
concerned teeth again.
3 concerned teeth.
Gotta go to the dentist about this. Come on, Charles.
Means more for Wales. I'm going to go Wales.
Wales. Just always the contrarian, isn't he?
No.
I'm going to go Italy. France, England. Sorry, England, France.
France for me.
England. Why not?
After everything you've just said for the last...
I was the semi-hopeful one of just not a total car crash. So, yeah, why not?
France. Scotland, Ireland. Ooh. I'm going to go Scotland.
Okay. I'm going to go Ireland.
I'm going to go Ireland as well.
Goes against my prediction. Super Bowl 59. Chiefs or Eagles? Who wins?
3-peat for me.
3-peat for Chiefs.
Don't care.
Is Taylor Swift playing?
Yeah, don't care.
No,
don't care.
I will go the Eagles if I'm very tired. Not the Eagles.
Hang on, this is Super Bowl.
They're not playing.
When's this?
Next Sunday.
Oh, is it? It's before.
So by the time we're back next Monday.
Okay.
If I seem quite sleepy on next week's podcast, it's because I've had to watch the second half, which I'll try not to do. Keep us up with everything on the website this week. We've got so much reaction to what happened in Dublin and a loads previewing the crunch as well as the other 2 games happening. And we're going to be back next Monday. Enjoy the games this weekend. We'll speak to you then. Thanks very much, listeners. Goodbye.
Go.compare sponsors the Telegraph Rugby Podcast. Every rugby player knows they need the support of their team to get the best results. And it's the same with insurance. When you are looking for great deals on your insurance, you can find the perfect support in Go.compare, helping compare the right deals for you. Feel the deal with Go.compare.